You're busy, you've got a decent practice, but nobody wants to be decent. You want to be great, and you want to have a great practice. So how did the most productive, profitable dentist in the nation balance real life, work, and profits, and somehow make it all seem fun? Well, it comes down to simple, everyday practices. So grab a lunch, join us as we chat with top clinicians and influencers to discover their formula for uncommon success. Are you ready? Then it's time to explore everyday practices with Vicki McManus-Peterson and Dr. Chad Johnson.
Hey everybody, welcome to Everyday Practices, and today we have a special guest, Ben Jump, with us today. Dr. Jump and I have known each other since about 2011 when we both were getting into CEREC. He had been in a couple years. So let's join into our Everyday Practices podcast here and learn more about his practice in Ohio. Dr. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Chad. How are you doing?
Doing fine. So I also want to let the audience know that Vicki is gone this week. She's down in South Africa-ish area and all that stuff in doing safari stuff in Africa. So we wish her safe travels with Dr. Bruce on the way home and all their families and whatnot. So today, a special co-host, Regan Robertson, our CMO for Productive Dentist Academy. How you doing, Regan?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me. Happy to co-host while our brave Victoria is sleeping with the lions.
A wee moe, a wee moe. So Dr. Ben, why don't you tell us, when did you graduate?
I graduated from Ohio State in 2003, so I've been in practice just a little over 16 years now.
Yeah.
And went back to my hometown, essentially, where I grew up, a small town just east of Columbus, Ohio, about 30 minutes. And I've been in the same practice the entire time. So when I first came into practice, it was, a nice established practice that was fairly dated, and I worked as an associate for about 5 years and then bought the practice, and I've owned it now for, 11 now. So
cool. Right on. Now, at what point did you start getting into technology? Because I couldn't do that on day one because I opened up straight out of school. But if you took over for a practice, you don't really get to call the shots. But was the old guy kind of interested in tech, or did you take it that way? How did that work?
I was the one who really took it that way. I bought the practice in 2008, and in 2009 was the first time I bought CEREC. So I bought Blue Cam, and then about 2 years later bought Galileo's Cone Beam, and then Omnicam, and now Prime Scan. So, but yeah, it's been a 10-year journey for sure. And it's what's really cool about it is when I first bought the Blue Cam, and bought the practice really, soon before that, I thought for sure that the dentist that I purchased the practice from, who I'd known basically my whole life, I figured, he's going to be ready to retire. But he actually hung on and practiced until 2015. He had been practicing for 41 years, and he's like, this is cool. Why would I want to stop now?
Right.
And so he really, really enjoyed, the last few years of his practice life, and it was probably the most enjoyable, I think, for him.
That's really cool for people that are kind of afraid of selling their practice or having an associate come in. Is an associate can reinvigorate your practice. I mean, did you see that with him? Absolutely. Yeah, it was, and actually one of the fun stories when I give presentations about guided surgery, one of the fun stories I like to tell is we had a patient who came to our practice who had an injury one time, and he had a tooth knocked out in a warehouse, and the doc that I worked with for years was a workers' compensation credentialized doctor at the time, and I was not. Long story short, the guy needed a dental implant to replace the tooth that was knocked out during the injury, and he had never placed an implant before in his life. So he got to do his first implant on number 8 doing a guided surgery, and I kind of stood over his shoulder and showed him how to do it. But you can remember those days, Chad, when you first start placing implants. You definitely don't want to start on number 8. But for this guy, but for him it was super cool to show him the workflow and how we plan the case virtually and all of that. So, but yeah, I mean, certainly it totally invigorated his thirst for dentistry towards the latter year of his career. But it was a lot of fun, and he really enjoyed it. So cool. What? Who do you teach the guided through?
I usually work through Dentsply Sirona. I do most of my stuff with Dentsply Sirona.
Gotcha.
I've done stuff with Patterson and China over the years as well, but most of my my guided surgery teaching comes from working through Dentsply Sirona and using the CCAT protocols.
Yes. Yeah. Do you now 3D print?
Yeah. We bought our first 3D printer about 4 years ago, which was the filament style printer, which was okay for making surgical guides and things like that. But we now have both a Moonray and Form printers, and we print a lot with doing surgical guides. My partner does a lot with printing ortho models and making her own aligners, things like that. But yeah, we've pretty much the only thing we take impressions for really are athletic mouth guards, but pretty much everything else is printed.
Did you mill? Did you ever mill your surgical guides, or did you just go straight to? See, I skipped the milling because I heard a lot of complaints about milling, but kind of binding up your unit, your MCXL unit and stuff.
I did. I milled plenty of them, and I, like you, my concern was, hey, if I've got a high ticket dollar piece of equipment that goes down that makes crowns for me and that allows me to be productive, if that goes down because I'm milling a surgical guide, that's a bigger deal than if my 3D printer goes down because of something I'm printing.
It's kind of like using your Ferrari for an Uber.
Yeah, it kind of is, right.
Yeah.
And I found that in most of my implant cases, I really didn't need to mill out a guide. I didn't need a guide in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's typically the workflow. That's the advantage of it. Now, obviously the disadvantage is there's a lot of cleanup and that. And I think for most offices, if you have a single milling unit and you have to take the time to change burrs and clean up the mess from milling the surgical guide, it becomes a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Now we have 2 full systems in my office, so we have 2 milling units, which is great. But even still, with 2 doctors, we've gotten used to that workflow where, hey, we can both have crowns at 9 o'clock, and we can both be milling at the same time. Whereas most multi-doctor practices that have 1 milling unit, 1 CEREC acquisition unit, they have to stagger.
Right.
It's a juggling match to try to figure out what's the best way to schedule. So,
yeah,
but
right.
Even still, I got away from milling guides just because I just didn't find it. I mean, they milled great. I mean, they were great, and when you'd execute the procedures, they worked beautifully. But printing was so easy, and it didn't affect our machines that allowed us to be productive.
Yes.
Dr. Ben does something really cool. I noticed on your Facebook that you post videos, kind of educational videos for patients and whatnot with your machines, which is really cool for a lot of people. I think a lot of people, patients, I should say, don't really know about the technologies that are available. So since you came in with this other doc and you had the opportunity to work with him for a few years and probably adopt a lot of his patient base, how do you, what have been your marketing efforts or community awareness around the technology that you have?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. Really, it's funny because 10 years after owning this equipment and having done many crowns over that period of time, we still have people that come in and they're fascinated with the fact that we can get a crown done for someone in a single visit, and essentially the same amount of time that we used to take for our first appointment for a traditional crown. And it's fun now to say, hey, we've been doing it this way for 10 years, whereas before it kept feeling like we were trying to, I don't want to say sell, but try to get them to do this because we got this new piece of equipment. But now now we're kind of.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you do it.
we get a little seasoned with it, and so now it's easy for explaining it to the patient who's had a traditional 2-appointment crown, for us to say to them, look, we can get this done in a single visit. You get numb once, we get it done. You don't have to come back. You don't have to miss work again, or you don't have to arrange childcare. That's an easy thing for us to get scheduled, versus saying, hey, it's going to take 2 appointments. The other advantage of it is once you've started to do it on patients, because most of the patients you do a crown for, they generally don't have just one need for one crown in their mouth. So when they end up needing a crown in the future, it's easy to say, look, we're just going to do this like we did it last time, and you'll leave with the final crown. But as far as marketing the procedure, honestly, 2 things that we've really done well. First, we enclosed our milling units. I borrowed an idea from Lindell Kemet,
yes.
who had a beautiful cabinet. When we redid his office, he had this beautiful cabinet that he made, and so we did the same thing and basically enclosed it with storefront glass. So it's up front by our front desk.
Wow! Wait, I haven't heard that before. So it's like on display for everybody to see?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
but better.
So it's on yes.
Yeah, explain it, Ben, so that way they get that.
Yeah, so essentially what it is, you have storefront glass like you would have at a shopping mall or whatever, but it's soundproof. So when you open the glass door, you can hear the milling units going, but when it's shut, you can't. But you can see it, and so you start to engage the patients in the process. And a lot of doctors do that. So, for example, when it comes time to mill the restoration, we invite patients out of the chair and have them put the block in the machine, have them tighten the block into the milling unit, shut the door, hit start, and they sit there and watch their restoration being milled. All the while, it's not bothering my front desk. But every single patient that walks in and out of our practice sees that, and they say, what is that? And we explain it to them.
I think that's amazing.
I've tried getting that priced out because that's been on my wish list ever since Lindell did that up in North Dakota. Sure. He's up in Minot, just for the people that, you'll look up Kemet Dental Design. And I'll be sending him all the business here to North Dakota.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
But Kemet Dental Design, and he's up in Minot, North Dakota, and he's got this glass encase. So mine is different. Mine's the old school fashion. Is you've got the milling unit out for display, and that's neat enough, especially the first 10 times, and then after 1,000 times when it's grinding and the front desk people are trying to answer the phone and all you hear is
right.
You think to yourself, isn't there a better way that we could hide this? And so, Ben, sure. I'm totally jealous. I really wish that in fact, I've got it priced out so that way I could pull the trigger on doing that, is get it enclosed, so that way you've got the appearance of it, but not the sound of it. That's the annoying sound.
Well, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if your team does this, Dr. Ben, or if you're doing this himself, but pulling it through the social. So having it in the practice right there for people to generate buzz and talk and have it be quiet, to me, I haven't heard that being very common. So I think that's amazing. And I would blow my doors off if I saw that in person. Socially, sure. Like from the social proof perspective, to see the happy patients that you have online and then seeing, so he's posted just the videos of the unit working. And I think that in itself also creates sort of that same feeling, except you're not in the practice. You're out there, trying to figure out which doc is the right doc for you to go to. So, sure. So do you have like a social media? Do you have a team that works on your social media and marketing for you, or is that?
Yes, we do it all in-house, essentially. I have 2 team members who spend a lot of time developing strategies and things like that. And we'll even walk through the entire process for people, and it's kind of fun. But the reality is, what's great about it is, we have a hard enough time as dentists trying to get patients excited about anything that we do. Because usually when we're treatment planning things, we're having to deliver news to them about something that they really don't want to have done or don't want to hear, unfortunately. Even though it's improving their health, it's still kind of like, they hold their breath during the exams until we're done with the exam. But what's cool about this is patients get engaged. Just from the second that we start designing the crowns on the screen, we'll have people pull out their cell phones and watch us, and they'll go Facebook Live or record and share it with their friends of us designing their crowns chairside in the software. They'll videotape I'm dating myself. We don't have videotape. Or they'll record the crown being milled and share it. There's really no other procedure that we do that generates that level of excitement within the practice.
I want to tell you how I do that, but I want your answer first, and I don't want to adulterate the idea. How do you get people to post it?
A lot of times we'll just say, hey, you know what? We'll say a lot of people will just pull out their phones and record it. It's pretty cool, and they'll just do it. But we don't
That's exactly what I say, and I didn't want to tell you that until I heard your answer first. But I say that because it's interesting when you prime the pump and you tell people, what's interesting. It blows my mind how many people record this and put it on Facebook. Yeah. And then I'll they probably wouldn't have thought of it. But then they're just like, well, I mean, shoot, I'm paying $1,000 for this. I'm going to pop out my phone and show it on there. So it's funny how you've come to the exact same conclusion. So it just is a natural way to market that, and you hit it on the nose. Good job.
Did you notice, Chad, how he does a transfer of ownership too? So Dr. Ben has them hold the block, right? Yes. Did you say that? You have the patient hold the block, put the block in, tighten it down. So now you're you've invited them into the conversation. You've invited them to share with their friends without telling them. You just sort of, like you said, Chad, prime the pump. And then you're doing that transfer of ownership. So they're in their story now, right? They've taken ownership of the whole process. So do you think, how are other practices in your area? Is this an area where you feel like this helps you stand out from the other docs in your area?
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of interesting because where I practice, the town I practice in is about 60,000 people. The town I actually live in is only about 4,000 or 5,000, which is adjacent. But the Newark, where my actual practice is, about 60,000 people, and we have, I'm going to say, about 30 dentists in our town, and I would say there are probably 12 to 13 offices that have CEREC in them. And what's interesting is that most of the offices, because I've trained for Patterson and Shine over the years, most of the offices locally, I did their training. And I don't find it to be something that I need to market myself from the standpoint of, look, I have this technology, I'm more sophisticated than the person down the street. I look at it as a way to raise the standard within our profession. And what's great about it, and what I love about it, and I'm sure Chad feels the same way, when you see your work on recall and it's awesome to see it holds up, and it's just dentistry that's done better. What's great though is when you're able to, as your practice life goes, you will have patients that leave your practice for whatever reason, their insurance changes or unfortunately it's a reality of running a business.
Sure.
And vice versa, I'll have patients come to my practice. What's great is that the dentists that are practicing at the same high level that we are, when their work comes in, I know it's great quality. I know they're using great materials. I know they've done their due diligence to deliver the best.
And Regan, do you hear that? He's not concerned so much about, trying to be like, what, I don't want to give any secrets, but he's looking at the bigger picture and just saying, when my community does better. Isn't that a cool perspective? The leaders when you hear them doing that.
Oh, it makes my heart melt. My dentist since I was 8 years old until 38 years old. I grew up with him, and he was a really, he still is. He's a humble man, and I found out after he retired from some fellow dentists in our area and stuff that he was just one of the very best clinicians. And he always took really great care of my smile and my family's smile, and you could tell he cared about the greater good and lifting up the whole. So it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'm. Like I said, there are so many patients in our area that there's plenty and for us to all have enough patients to go around. But the reality for me, it's a higher standard of care, and any dentist that is used to practicing and designing their own restorations and seeing their work blown up on a monitor 20 times its original size, you become a better dentist very quickly.
That's right.
And that's the truth. That's what makes it. It's one of those kind of unknowns when you first get into doing CAD/CAM dentistry. But you certainly learn quickly that it becomes much, much better, and really it raises the bar for our profession.
Dr. Ben, you cannot see it, but Regan is smiling really big because I think you've inspired her, and inspiring dentists are who we love talking to. So I'm really glad. I tell you what, I want you to come back on, but I've got 2 more questions for you. One is goofy and one is serious. I'm going to start with the serious one.
Sure.
Any cool book that you've read in the last year or 2?
The ones that I really like, Simon Sinek books, and one that I just read was Leaders Eat Last. When you talk about a kind of a humble approach to things, but Simon Sinek really inspires me, and Leaders Eat Last was one of the better books I've read recently.
Very cool, very cool. All right, and so here's my last question. You have to choose one or the other. It's just a fun thing that we do for all our guests.
Okay.
Eggs or bacon?
Eggs.
Eggs it is.
Whoa!
Yeah, and you wouldn't think, a Midwest guy, we've got lots of pork farms around here, but I definitely would go with the gold standard of protein, right? Is the egg white.
Well done. Way to behave.
Do you and Vic have a running tally of the eggs versus bacon?
No. It's but we've talked about it. I bet it's 2/3-ish bacon.
Yeah.
2/3, 3/4, something like that. I think everyone likes the guilty pleasure of just saying bacon,
Sure.
But
sure.
I mean, I'll tell you what is a popular answer is, why can't it be both? That actually
true.
A good response there.
The omelet.
Yes, an omelet with sausage included.
Right.
Well, buddy, I want to get you back on, but what we were talking about, specific to a lot of CEREC stuff, because you and I are kind of banter off back and forth about that kind of stuff. I've known you for, 7 or 8 years regarding that kind of stuff. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on. And I think in our world, we start to think that that's just kind of commonplace, especially when people say, what is this new technology? When did this come out? And you're like, I think it was 1983. And people are like, what? And so it blows their mind. But, we have to remind ourselves that, some people we need to invite to check this kind of stuff out, if they're interested. Yeah. And it does make you into a better clinician, and it's another option to use. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there. But CEREC definitely has led in the last 10, 15, 20 years in, kind of being the Apple or the Tesla of dentistry.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree. In fact, I was in Pittsburgh giving a presentation about 2 weeks ago, and there were 120 dentists or something in the room. And I always start out by, because you don't really know how technologically advanced the audience is going to be, and I had them, how many of you have CAD/CAM in your practice or milling units, and no one had a milling unit. 5 or 6 people had just digital impressioning, and I think there were 4 or 5 cone beams in a room of 125.
I was guessing it was going to be under 15.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, we take for granted, or at least I do. I'll speak for myself.
Yeah,
just what we do every day, and how we treatment plan cases, how we look at cases. I watch my partner here. She designs her aligners in Blue Sky Plan. It's just remarkable to think that she's doing this day in and day out. And for us to plan a surgical guide or to design a simple crown, it's so commonplace for us, and we've been doing it for so long. But yet, so many of our colleagues are not there yet. Mm-hmm. And like you said, as you know, once you make the leap of faith into doing it, it's one of those things you'd never look back. Like, I couldn't imagine having to go back to taking impressions every day final impressions for crowns and sending it out to a lab and making provisionals and that whole world that I lived in for 5 or 6 years.
Right. Well, Dr. Ben also runs the CEREC Club for Central Ohio. If you're interested in that area or happen to be passing through or willing to travel, you are quite a polymath on all the key opinion leader stuff. We'll have that listed below in the written part so that way people can read up on you and get to know you better. But I'm glad to have kind of showcased you for our listeners. So I want to just recognize you and appreciate you for coming on our show, Dr. Ben.
Thanks, Chad. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. I'm happy to do it anytime. Yeah,
and if Vicki isn't back, Regan, do you mind if you were to come back on for another few episodes here and there?
I would be honored to. It's been a blast.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thanks, Regan. It was fun.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, and to all our listeners for Everyday Practices, thanks so much.
Bring your lunch or take us to the gym again next week to improve your everyday practices. Also, subscribe on iTunes, follow us on social media, and sign up for our email list. Now get out there and win with Everyday Practices.